This week is absolutely insane. It's like the industry decided there's no Thanksgiving for us. We're just going to keep this party going. The Zillow Flex lawsuit explodes with new RICO allegations. What up, Diddy? Wave Group warns Zillow is no longer competing, it's governing. Also, is it WAP? Is it Wave? We don't know. NAR drops the MLS membership update. Will this make an impact? A judge rejected the class certification in Batten versus NAR. A procedural win, but is it really a win? NAR promises zero-based budgeting as one of its future goals. Can this organization actually deliver on its promises it made at its big conference this week? All that and Russ Cofano joins me on The Clean Close. Welcome back to The Clean Close. I'm your host, Courtney Polis. And wow, this week, the hits keep on coming. The Zillow Flex lawsuit has now upgraded itself to adding RICO claims. You say, what? However, the amended complaint filed on Wednesday in a recent Inman article says it expands the scope of the complaint that was you remember from last week, the Zillow Flex program is incentivizing Zillow Flex agents to give their clients to Zillow Home Loans. And they're saying it's not disclosed, that's not legal, it's not giving the consumer the right to choose, okay? So there's an amended complaint. The amended complaint is expanding the scope, adding 8 plaintiffs from Washington, California, Michigan, North Carolina, Virginia, Georgia, Nevada, Florida, and Connecticut, and 4 new defendants, including Zillow Home Loans and 3 brokerages enrolled in Flex. So now it's starting to hit the brokerages that have agents using the Flex program. Let me say that again. Now it's starting to hit the brokerages that have agents using the Flex program. The most significant, this is from the suit, this is from the Inman News article. The most significant additions to the complaint are the expansion of Zillow's alleged RESPA violations and the addition of a new Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act count. Now, wasn't RICO supposed to be for like mafia? And then they start throwing it out there, just applying it to all kinds of things. We'll see if they do better on this one than on the Diddy case. But anyway, in the initial complaint, the RESPA violation centered on the alleged lack of transparency regarding how homebuyers are connected to Flex agents and the fees Flex agents pay to be displayed on Zillow listings. But now the RESPA count is focusing on the Flex loans and how agents are getting home buyers approved with Zillow Home Loans. Okay, quote, many Zillow Flex agents know virtually nothing about the real estate process or the neighborhoods in which they're showing homes, yet these same agents are falsely promoted as top agent on Zillow, based solely on their participation in the Zillow Flex program, the filing read. Zillow's requirement that Flex agents use Zillow's follow-up boss, which we also covered, allows Zillow to eavesdrop on communications between the agent and the buyer, violating the agent's duty of confidentiality. Zillow also uses follow-up boss to catch Flex agents who may recommend other loan providers to their clients, to censure them appropriately, it added. Wow. So what I thought with follow-up boss being purchased by Zillow and then Zillow's follow-up boss's recent terms of service changes, that they just wanted to get the inside scoop on client, like agent interaction with potential clients so they could get ahead of that interaction, that communication with the clients. But it looks like the accusation here is that Zillow is using follow-up boss to spy on their agents and potentially punish them for recommending other lenders than the Zillow Home Loans lenders. That is crazy. Anybody else think that's crazy? I think that's crazy. That is nuts. That has to be illegal. How could they do that? Anyway, the RICO count, the filing said, is to account for brokerages' participation in Zillow's alleged scheme to inflate consumer costs. They keep throwing this in. They threw this in last week on one as well. I call bullshit on that. I think it was the one of the working group. No, it wasn't the working group. This came up again. It's like this. They seem to just like throw this in at the end that somehow agents are inflating their costs to offset the fees they pay, the referral fees they pay to Zillow. I have never seen that. I don't know if that has any basis in fact. And again, since now buyers and sellers negotiate with the agents separately for their services, the agent can accept or reject any proposal of commission as the client can as well. So I'm not sure that that part stands. But I'm just mind blown that Zillow is catching Flex agents and then censuring them. That is just deep. Okay, quote, Zillow's scheme hinges on cooperation from the Zillow Flex agents and their collective ability to work together to fraudulently induce prospective buyers into using Zillow Flex agents, the filing read. By working together as part of an enterprise, I guess that's the mafia part, and using the mail in furtherance of their fraudulent scheme. Using the mail, okay? Zillow, along with the 3 real estate agencies and other unnamed co-conspirators, this is getting real, who acted as brokers for 3 plaintiff sales, violated RICO. I mean, this is just pure scandal. Somebody needs to get ahead of this. I feel like somebody needs to do a deep dive, get inside the inner workings of Zillow, stop listening to their podcast performances and their stage performances and blah, 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 and get in there. I mean, don't you want to see text messages? I want to see everything. This is feeling like real estate's Epstein. This is nuts. This can't be right. And the bottom line is it doesn't serve the consumer. That's what it all comes down to. It all comes down to if they are actually doing this, which is alleged at this point, have to say that, this feels really bad. This feels really bad, like unsustainable bad. Like they might have just cooked their own goose, just tried too hard, reached too far, squeezed too much. Zillow, I keep trying to reverse my opinion of you, and then you do this. Maybe, allegedly. Okay, so we'll keep an eye on the RICO charges. That's pretty crazy. I can't even believe that that story came out today. I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Wowzers. If there are any Zillow Flex agents or anybody who has an insight on this, I've definitely heard from lenders that this is really happening. We interviewed one last week who could testify to the fact that multiple agents are telling him this. So obviously that part's happening, but what? Wave Group, I still don't know, is claiming that Zillow is becoming a policymaker. So they released an article this week saying, what happens when Zillow stops competing and starts governing? And this is brought up by Compass in their lawsuit that essentially by Zillow making these changes to the way listings are displayed, to the listing terms, that they are acting as a policeman of sorts, or that they are changing the way the game is played, that it is unfair. Like they're setting industry new rules. One of the quotes from the article says, if Zillow enforces compliance through visibility, boosting listings that follow its standards and suppressing those that don't, it effectively becomes the arbiter of participation. Why is this important? This is important because we are all imagining, what does a post-MLS world look like? What does it look like if Zillow wins in this private listings debate? Does Zillow as a platform have the right to kind of make the rules up as it goes? And one of the things in this article that it talks about is the ChatGPT integration, how they did not ask for permission to make that integration. They interpreted the IDX licensing agreement the way they wanted to, kind of like Amazon did, kind of like some other big firms have done in the past. And it's like an act first, apologize later type of program, okay? But once certain horses have left the stable, shall we say, it could be that they could kind of leave the rest of the world behind, meaning if they pull out of associations, right, or if they no longer really need MLSs to govern them and tell them what rules they should be abiding by, and they play by their own rules, then, they're going to exist as a nationwide MLS, and we have to play by their rules in order to get visibility on their sites. And I can totally imagine that happening. So the article suggests that the implications for MLSs and brokerages is as follows. MLSs now face a legitimacy test. If a private portal can redefine data display and access unilaterally, who governs the marketplace? Now, to be fair, just to go back to this, Zillow, in refusing to publish any listings that were once privately listed on other platforms, is disincentivizing private listings. Yes, but who was the original disincentivizer of private listings? NAR, with the clear cooperation policy. So while we're attributing quite a bit of Zillow's rule playing to Zillow, like they're playing outside the bounds, but really it's what the intention of clear cooperation was, which was everybody needs to get their listings onto the MLS within one day. Now the MLSs and NAR are backpedaling, they're doing delayed entry, they're creating new tabs, they're doing all these things to try and kind of accommodate the demand. But it might be a little too late. That's what I'm feeling anyway. And honestly, since the MLS missed the boat on creating a nationwide MLS, which people have been demanding for years, Realtor.com had the opportunity to do it. I've said it a million times. In a way, they do have control. In a way, they do. Because 85% of home buyers, supposedly, shop on Zillow when they're looking for a home. So yes, at least in one way, they definitely govern visibility, which is half the battle when it comes to listings, right? Brokerages must navigate dual compliance regimes, MLS rules versus portal rules. Interesting, indeed. And now in this post-NAR settlement world, NAR has given MLS so much more power. Now MLSs are the police state. They're acting as bodies. We're going to talk with Russ Cofano today, and he has a hypothesis on how this could go. But from my point of view, I think that the MLSs aren't structured to be able to handle enforcement. So that has always been done at an association level. And now that even the association membership is being disassembled, what does it look like? Where's the standard of code of ethics, standards of practice? MLS might have a set of rules that if Zillow decides they want to play by different rules, an agent's going to be left to figure out which rules to play by. And of course, it would be absolutely fine for them to play by each portal's or, each company's individual rules, fine, as long as they don't violate NAR rules. And that's adding a third governing body into the mix. Technology vendors risk conflicts as Zillow's integration stretch beyond traditional IDX boundaries. It's true, that IDX agreement, that agreement that allows our listings from the MLS to be showcased on aggregator websites, was completely jumped in the ChatGPT integration and could potentially be a little bit broken, it seems, at least subject to interpretation, it seems. MLSs are trying to come out with new IDX policies, amendments, and clarifications. But is it too little, too late? I'm saying this again. Consumers may gain transparency, yet lose control over how listings are marketed or prioritized when the listing agent no longer has control over the listing. So does this all just lead back to a power grab? So in this scenario where we have to play by Zillow's rules to get our listings in front of the Zillow audience, which on its surface doesn't sound weird, except that it's a brokerage too. So there's a conflict of interest. You know what? I think they should just stop allowing portals like this to have their brokerage license, right? I don't know, there's something icky about it now. It just doesn't feel right. And when you see some of the accusations from the Compass Zillow website lawsuit, it's kind of like, oh my gosh, if they're really saying these things, how can agents still in good conscience partner with these people that are trying to destroy us? It's pretty crazy. They ask, if you're an agent who has a problem with the ChatGPT integration, to maybe ask your MLS execs a couple of questions. Ask them, is the domain chatgpt.com Zillow's domain? Because the data license agreement says you may only display search on the domain that is yours or under your control. So that seems like a good place to start. It says ask MLS exec if it's reciprocal. I guess the question is, can our industry actually fight back against these tiny little changes that could have a huge impact? I'm going to throw it to one of our sponsors now, but I'll be right back after this break. Relationships matter in real estate. If you're watching this, you already know that. That's why I send my clients to Matthew Fine from Blueprint Home Loans. He is super likable. He's one of us. He is hip to what's going on in the real estate market. And honestly, he's creative. He cares about the American dream, and he helps our clients with creative solutions to getting their loan accomplished and getting them into those houses. I love that when you can count on somebody and you know when you're sending them to your client that they're not going to let them down. So if you're looking for a new lender partner and you're frustrated by the ones you've been referring your clients to, give Matthew Fine a call. He is on Instagram at mortgagematt with 3 T's. I'll also put his contact information in the show notes. Now back to the show. NAR repeals MLS membership requirement. Okay, so NAR just announced that they are no longer requiring membership in the organization for agents to have access to the MLS. They want that to be a local MLS decision. If you're watching this, you probably already know that some MLSs are owned by the association, some MLSs are owned by agents, brokers. I like that they made this announcement, but in reality, in California, we've already had that decoupling. Apparently, it doesn't affect the fact that we have to be members of the association in order to get the forms. So we have to be members of CAR in order to get the forms to write offers. So even if they say you don't have to be a member of NAR, CAR, and GLAR in order to be a member of the MLS, for us, we can't do our job without the association membership the way that it is currently done. So feels a bit like a soft punt to me. It doesn't go far enough. I'm just leaving that there. Hopefully it goes farther for some of you out there who do not have that same problem. Like hopefully for people who have association forms available, or rather real estate sales forms available to them from the DRE, then this would be a no-brainer. That's what I think. Okay, in another headline that is maybe something's there, maybe something's not there, I don't know. But in Batten versus NAR, there was a procedural win. A federal judge struck down class certification efforts in the Batten Homebuyer Commission lawsuit. This is a quote from the article, which I'll put in the show notes. It gives NAR and major brokerages a procedural win. Judge LaShonda Hunt ruled without prejudice, meaning they can come back. Citing an existing Sitzer-Burnett injunction. Basically what they were saying is that Batten versus NAR is suing for the same thing that was in Sitzer-Burnett. So in order for this suit to proceed, this is the way I interpret the article, they have to come back with a new class certification, meaning the class action, the way that it was drafted, is not going to fly, or narrow their complaint down to a more specific infraction. So it buys NAR a little bit of breathing room, but it ultimately is a win. And maybe it's putting a little bit of a dampening on this flurry of lawsuits that thought they could ride the back of Sitzer-Burnett to just bankrupt NAR and the whole entire industry. Just saying. Headline 5 is NAR, recently at a conference. There are lots of headlines in the news about it. They are promising a zero-based budget in the future. And so they were promising lots of other things too. There's a 75-point plan. They want more transparency. There are a few headlines I can tell you. Here's what they said they're going to do, okay? Modernize real-time market reports for members. Real estate's very local. Our MLSs have market reports. We now have all these AI tools. We have RPR. We have House Canary. We have other market analysis tools. So I'm not sure how valuable that's going to be, but hey, this is what they say they're going to do. Create a new legal group to reduce legal risk for the industry. Do they really need another group? They have so many people working there. All of our forms are written by lawyers. Every DRE and licensing authority is state by state. So I don't know what a national legal group is going to look like aside from, working with their state associations to maybe make better forms that are less litigious or more transparent. I'm not sure. So, okay. Improving NAR's budgeting process to add trust and transparency. Yeah, that's needed for sure. Here's one more thing. They said they're maintaining the three-way agreement, meaning they want us to pay our dues at the local, state, and national levels, no matter what. And then this one I found cheeky. Improving the realtor brand through social media and national ad campaigns. I'm going to go over this with Russ later, but I honestly don't think we need PR for the brand, for the realtor trademark, the logo, whatever. What we need is PR for our job. We need people to know how irreplaceable we really are, how much expertise matters in this, all the different things that happen throughout the day where real estate agents are juggling psychology, contracts, procedural things, making sure, literally, James Harris, I just saw on an Instagram post talking about the burnout is real. Like the phone can ring at any moment. It feels like you're on call all the time. And if any of you have had a job where you're on call all the time, it's like a jump scare every second. Every call is like a potential crisis. It's like, it's even worse for brokers or people who are managing, because I'm dealing with my own drama and the drama that we're trying to avoid on any transaction among any number of agents at any time. So, I feel like what's missing as a result of these lawsuits is public trust in what our position actually is. Spend less time on the logo and more time on the constituents, which is us. We're the ones that pay you. So figure out what's important to us. What message do we think the public needs to know about what it is that we do, and put that in the messaging. Okay, NAR? Anyway, but this other piece I thought was really cute. Okay, NAR zero-based budget. What does that look like? So a zero-based budget means that you only spend what you budget for, no more, no less. You don't continue to create this entire big bag that could be a target for lawsuits, right? So NAR wouldn't have a bunch of money sitting in an account. If they do this, they're going to spend everything that they receive. However, in reading a Housing Wire article, I went back to 2024. A New York Times Housing Wire article, revealed that the former CEO, Bob Goldberg, had 3 memberships to exclusive country clubs, paid first-class airfare for personal travel, had a $1,500 a month car allowance, free pet sitting for his dogs, Tuffy and Fonzie, and tickets to Hamilton at the height of the musical's popularity. These niceties, this is from the article, were on top of a salary of $1.2 million per year that later ballooned to $2.6 million, according to NAR's 2022 Form 990. Other NAR executives who earned over $1 million in 2022 are Mark Birschbach, the Senior Vice President of Strategic Business Innovation and Tech, and Shannon McGann, the Senior Vice President of Government Affairs. The president in 2022 earned nearly $413,566. The president-elect got $256,956, and the first vice president, Tracy Casper, earned $181,362, and then the treasurer got $212,356. Okay, I'm not saying that people don't deserve to earn money. People do, and in fact, some of these vice presidents and treasurers, you're like, okay. If you're really great, it's a huge organization. They're managing tons of money. I can see why you want a good treasurer, right? But for the CEO to be getting $2.6 million and all these nice perks while they're asking for volunteer members to show up and dedicate their time for free on all these things just feels crazy to me. It really feels crazy. And then it's like, with all that money, what did we get? We got a bunch of lawsuits that cost our industry, a lot of brokerages, NAR itself, millions and millions of dollars. So paying more does not necessarily result in better performance, as far as I can see. I think that NAR got a little bit too big, a little bit too making its, I think it was kind of feeling itself like there's no one that could ever take it down. And now, unfortunately for NAR, I think the moment has come where a lot of people are questioning, do we need this after all, at all? How Netflix took down Blockbuster. There just might be something around the corner that says, we've moved on. And with all of that hitting the industry at once, the lawsuits, the governance shifts, the portal power moves, and NAR's decentralization, well, maybe, there's no better guest to help us decode what happens next. Russ Cofano, a leader with experience in every corner of the housing ecosystem, brokerage, MLS, associations, and policy, former president of EXP World Holdings, former president and CEO of Collabra Technology, senior executive at Move Inc., general counsel at John L. Scott, and CEO of Missouri Realtors, now co-founder of Alloy Advisors. Welcome to the Clean Close, Russ.
Hi, Courtney. Great to be here.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you here. I've been reading your recent op-eds. There's a lot to get into, and I'm very curious on a few of your recent comments and conversations. So let's just break them down. First of all, what interests you most about what's happening with NAR right now?
Well, for the first time, I think there's been a lot of talk over the years, but I think for the first time, we're seeing some real movement in the decentralization of NAR's control over the industry. And it's not just on the NAR side, it's on some on the brokerage side, some large brokers who basically are not real happy about the way the NAR handled the antitrust litigation,
Right.
especially excluding a large number of them from the settlement, and putting the economic burden on them to settle and pay millions and millions of dollars for something that arguably didn't need to come to the point it did. And we can get into that as well. But so there's not just NAR realizing that it has real continued risk. I mean, the lawsuits are not stopping. I mean, you just read the news cycle these days, and it's a lawsuit every day. And I think it's going to continue. And NAR realizes that it's in the crosshairs, so it has to do something. But I think for the very first time, we're seeing a crack in the industry's perspective of saying, we actually might be ready for this decentralization of historical NAR power over the industry.
Well, I was shocked when I started digging into how they've been spending money. I was like, okay, so they in 2022 had $2 billion and they have this private venture capital thing. I'm like, wait, what? So obviously having a big purse makes you a candidate for a large lawsuit, but also it's been very questionably run. And, as an agent, I think that, and a broker, which I am, I think we are always on the line for defending our associations and their value. But as of late, a lot of my agents, especially when the purse strings have to be pulled in because the market's slowed down, they're like, what am I getting in exchange for this? More lawsuits, restrictions, I can't play fair. So a lot of people are questioning the value of membership. I think statistically, more than 50% of NAR's membership is questioning the value. So I read that stat somewhere. I mean, here's one thing though. I saw the headline and covered it that they are now allowing MLS locally to determine whether or not NAR membership is required, right? Mm-hmm. So how does that feel for you? And then I'll tell you what I think.
Well, so first of all, I think your company is primarily in California.
Right.
And in California and in a few other states, there's some federal law that basically has been on the books for quite a few years that has allowed, or has basically said, you can't tie association membership with MLS membership. So that's why, to the extent your audience says, wait a second, we already know that we don't have to be a member of the association, be a member of the MLS. That's not the case in the majority of the country. In the majority of the country, most associations require membership in their association to also access the MLS services, in many cases that are owned by the association. They may be run separately, may be part of a regional that has multiple association ownership, but the general rule, and this has been an NAR policy. So NAR, look at, I want to make sure I'm clear on this. I'm not anti-NAR in any way, shape, or form. I ran a realtor association. I think that NAR, the realtor organization as a whole, federal or national, state, and local, does a wonderful job in some elements for the industry. and MLSs would not exist today without the association, without NAR essentially creating them. And our business operates incredibly efficiently because of MLSs. So NAR has done a ton of good. At the same time, we are now in a new reality. And the challenge we have is NAR policy essentially trying to manage MLS, how MLSs operate across most of the country. And from a top-down standpoint, they're realizing that has tremendous legal risk associated with it. And they see, because of the focus on antitrust, that what an association delivers and what an MLS delivers are really distinct services. And when you try to connect them, or in the world of antitrust, tie them together, you create a potential antitrust concern. And so what NAR did this week is said, look, we know what we've done in the past. Going forward, whether an association wants to mandate membership in the association to access the MLS is going to be made at the local level. We, NAR, are no longer going to be part of that sort of mandate. That sounds great on the surface.
Right.
And again, I don't believe that NAR is doing this because they had some benevolent epiphany that says, this is the way it should be, right? And I don't believe that at all. No. It's a risk mitigation decision. The problem
I totally get that.
Yeah. The problem is that even if an association were to do that, there's still some significant ties to association membership. For example, in many areas, lock boxes are managed by the association. They're not an MLS service. So imagine having access to an MLS, but not being able to access the lockbox system. That'd be very challenging.
Right.
Forms in many cases are essentially managed. Like the copyright of the form is managed by the association. So if you're not a member of the association, even if you have access to the MLS, now you've got to come up with your own forms, and that puts you at a tremendous disadvantage in submitting offers and getting those offers accepted. And maybe probably the most meaningful thing in terms of economics is the NAR broker billing policy. Basically, if one of your agents came to you and says, hey, Courtney, you know what? I don't really want to be a member of the association, but you as a brokerage company believes that being a member of the association is a good thing. First of all, you must belong to all three levels. So it's basically what's commonly known as the three-way agreement. There really is no agreement.
The three-way agreement.
The structure. So you have to belong to the national, state, and local, and pay all those dues. And even if your agent chooses not to be a member because the association doesn't require it, you're still on the hook for paying for them. You get billed for every one of the agents in your office. So it ties.
You don't even have to tell me. I've been in that situation where literally one agent didn't pay their dues on time, and it shut down forms for our entire company. And that makes the brokerage have to pay. I just want to interrupt you for 1 second here, because you are hitting on the things that are absolutely why I think this move, while it might signal some flexibility or some acknowledgement of the problem, which NAR has been slow to acknowledge on many of these things. We're like calling out to NAR, do you have comment? Do you have comment, NAR? They're like, no comment. They just aren't ahead. They're playing defense. And, so I ran an experiment because I wanted to see how far I could go as a non-association member. So I called the MLS and I was like, hey, I've been reading articles about, how we are allowed to be non-members of CLAR, CAR, and NAR and still belong to you. How do your non-member agents get the forms? And they were like, oh no, you have to belong to the association. So I know that that's true in a lot of places. So if this is really the way they want to do it, why can't just the broker subscribe to the forms if that's really what we need, or have the broker be the person who has to join all three associations, and we can distribute the forms or provide access for our agents? There is a part of this where it feels like they are making a move, but it's not a real move. For us, certainly, it allows us still no freedom. The system isn't set up for it to work this way. And even as we talk about that, they're proposing that the MLS still has the old type of relevance that it used to. And if everything that's on the MLS is aggregated to Zillow, to Redfin, we have the listing agent's contact information, and then the private listings, people are still allowed to keep private listings off the MLS. I'm not seeing them on Zillow or Redfin anyway. And we're not advertising cooperating compensation. What do I need the MLS for?
Well, I'm a big proponent of the MLS, primarily because of the way that they manage data and ensure accuracy of data. I think that if you look at really what goes on in an MLS, there's a lot of non-sexy things that MLSs are responsible for to make sure that the data that you and your agents are accessing is accurate.
But it's not.
What's that?
It's not accurate. The way agents enter days on market, that is not accurate. The way that the MLS continues to count days on market, even when there's an accepted offer, causes agents to change the status to pending, even when there are contingencies. And there's no policing of this. It just skews the data. Plus, there's no mandate for private listings to be entered for comp purposes. Some companies are just occasionally putting those comps in there so they can have it counted for their volume, but there's no mandate. So we're not, as Compass and other companies lean into private listings, there's a significant portion of sales that are not even showing up in our MLS data.
Well, that's the challenge with private exclusives is essentially not giving the marketplace access to those listings. And the unfortunate thing is we're seeing look at Robert Refkin and Compass and others that do private exclusives can be on stage all they want and talk about the rights of consumers all they want.
Right.
The bottom
we
line
know that's
is
not what it's about.
They know that being able to double end deals is a key element of profitability. And the brokerage industry at large did this to themselves. They've allowed, it's been a race to the bottom. So you look at some of the largest and fastest growing brokerage companies, including one I worked with, EXP, they're giving away more and more and more and more of the company dollar, making it very difficult for brokerage companies, large brokerage companies, to be profitable. And now you've got companies like Compass and soon to be the Compass Anywhere composition having to deliver profits to Wall Street. And guess what? They can't do it. They can't deliver the value proposition that agents are demanding because we all know that agents own the business today. Brokerage companies don't own the business. The agents own the business. And that's not how it used to be. And so this has really become the path. It's not a consumer issue. It's a path to profitability.
Well, I think that you make a really great point that when you have such a gigantic conglomerate answering to Wall Street, it clearly is just constantly scraping to satisfy the bottomless pit of greedy shareholders. It's like they can't, they have, it must be exhausting. It must be exhausting to have the consumer, the actual bread and butter, the person who has an actual home to sell, being the collateral damage in this, which I think is really the case. I read through some of the addendums that they have to sign when they're signing like private exclusives. And I'm like, this seems like you're signing an addendum acknowledging that you won't get the highest price necessarily. You won't get the most showings necessarily. And there's no guarantee that you're going to get the best terms. It's like, what is happening in these listing presentations that makes someone want to sign this? But if you follow the money, it never looks like it's in the consumer's interest. So I agree. The seller choice, the consumer choice aspect of this is a marketing campaign. It's a PR spin, in my opinion, just saying. But when you actually look at whether it's the MLS, NAR, or the way our current entire industry is operating, Zillow, et cetera, and how tech has changed things, we have to simplify things by going back to the homeowner. Like, if it were you, would you want your listing to have the most access? Yes. Would you want your agent to be held to a high standard? Yes. as a broker, do I want my agents to all agree to some kind of standards of ethics and professional conduct? Yes. Do I wish there was a place where our voices could be heard that didn't have 1,500? What did you say in your article? There's like 1,500 member panels or something like that on the
Well,
board?
when you combine the number of people that are on the NAR board of directors with the number of people that are in the NAR delegate body, and both of those entities had to approve this recent vote on disclosure of referral fees. Yeah, you have over 1,500 people involved in that decision, which seems a bit
It's too
archaic in
much.
today's world.
It's too much. I've been on some of these, like I've been on like some board Zooms and stuff. They'll invite me to speak because I have strong opinions about things, and I'm shocked at how many people are in there. And I think, how can it be? How can big decisions that affect so many of us be done this way? Like, there's no way for even everyone to have a voice in this. It's too big. And,
Well, and you know you know better than me because you're in the business, right? Real estate's a local business, right? What goes on in Austin, Texas, or in
LA.
Boston, Massachusetts, or in Seattle, Washington, honestly, doesn't affect you. What goes on in
Right.
LA and Florida, where you're doing business, that's what affects you. And
Right.
so the question is, should real estate rules and standards of practice and professionalism be determined at some national level, or should they really be determined more at the local level? And I think let's just look at the reality. Uh, as I mentioned in the article that got published on Real Estate News yesterday,
Yes.
the same issue of disclosure referral fees was handled by Northwest MLS, which is a broker-owned
Right.
MLS. They're not a realtor-owned MLS.
Association owned.
Um,
Right.
they did it quickly. They realized this is the right thing to do. Gets implemented. There's the process of months and months and months of review
Right.
and
The whole thing.
procedures and votes.
Yeah.
We don't need to do that. And so I think that we're um, at one point in time having a national overlay around this business made sense. It really did because the business was evolving. I think now we're at a place where the pendulum needs to swing to far more local control, and NAR, acknowledged that with its decisions this week. Now it needs to actually stand behind
Implement.
those decisions and start doing some things that enable those things to actually take place.
I totally agree. And I actually have a hypothesis, Russ. Would love to hear your thoughts on this. Since licensing is done at the state level, why can't we have one statewide MLS? Because one of the things from your article that was published in Real Estate News that I took away from it is you have a lot of faith in the MLS. But I think some of the things that you want the MLS to be able to employ, such as maybe transferring code of ethics, which, you know, one could argue was not really enforced anyway.
Right.
But transferring it to the MLS, it's just not structured that way. In my opinion, MLS, at least here, okay, mine, can't even get the data right. For years at national conferences, we've been talking about standardizing entry, like even terms. You know, on one MLS, you enter renovated, on another one, you enter remodeled. So there's no way to synchronize the tags and that kind of thing. So since licensing is at the state level and the forms are at the state level, why can't we have one MLS for the state that adheres to DRE rules, that sets other types of rules as you suggest, and then have maybe a nationwide private listing network so that it's not just, you know, any consumer who actually says to their agent, listen, my aunt is sick, she's living in the guest house, I don't want the pictures, I don't want the people in and out of the house, I'd like to list this privately, but I still want to get this out to the maximum number of agents possible. I just don't want it on Redfin and Zillow, et cetera. That there would be a space, a legitimate space for those types of listings that everyone who's a licensee nationwide could have access to. What do you think about that as a solution?
Well, the challenge. First of all, I love it because
Yay.
today we have over 500 MLSs in the country,
I
and
know.
nobody would agree that we need 500 MLSs in our country. Now, why do we have 500 MLSs? Well, partly because of the way that MLSs were created, which was through local associations. I think I don't know the number of local associations these days. I want to say it's closer to maybe 1,000. So MLSs sprouted up from local associations. It gave the local association and the people that ran that association control over their local marketplace. And the only reason that we don't have, to your hypothesis, 50 MLSs, and I would argue even maybe we need less than that, is because of politics and the desire for local control. People don't want to give up the fact that what goes on in their particular city should be essentially run by somebody at the state level. And at some point in time,
I mean, the rules are the state. The rules come at the state. The forms come at the state. Education comes from the state. So from my personal opinion, NAR, I don't get any value out of NAR. I don't think their lobbying has worked. They didn't prevent these lawsuits. I'm not a fan of clear cooperation. It made me sell real estate with my hands tied behind my back and essentially bow over to Compass, who is literally exploiting this marketing scheme to our entire area and continues to do so. And so for a boutique brokerage like me, it felt like NAR did not have my back for sure. But you know who did have my back during the wildfires? Who has our back for education? Who has our back for form revision? Who always is asking for information and input? California Association of Realtors. I would just belong to them because I know what their value is. For our local association, I don't really know. I wouldn't say that I get a ton of value there either. Like, I don't go to them for anything, and they don't really provide anything like education-wise that is super valuable to me. So I'm just saying, if everything rules-wise is at the state level, I don't see why it's outside the bounds, since we really have no local control over our MLS anyway. We have none, really. Trust me, I went into the MLS, Russ, because this is years ago. They were launching a new app or something, and they wanted broker feedback. They had 10, 15 brokers, who were literally brokers, people running Hilton Highland, whatever, me. And they had what seemed like college age interns maybe at the front of the room saying, okay, can you guys tell us what you do in a day? And I was like, this is our MLS. Asking brokers like me who are walking out of our business that we're doing to come here and give you our feedback. And you've got people who are so not familiar with what we do in a day that we had to walk them through, and we walk up to a listing and we sign into the app and we check the showing instructions and we find the CBS code or whatever, I was shocked. So I think to hold the MLSs to a higher standard, yes, some MLSs are not going to be able to make the money I think the money part is the piece we haven't talked about either. Why all the MLSs still exist is because they all make money. I've been licensed in 5 states. I'm currently licensed in 2, but I sell in 2 different parts of Florida, South Florida and Orlando. I shouldn't say I'm currently selling there, but I have my license in Florida, and I want access to both. They don't talk to each other. Those MLSs don't talk to each other. So I have to belong to all these different MLSs. They all have different rules and tools and ways to have access to the Supras. You have to switch keys, and it's messy. It's so unnecessary. So in my personal opinion, if we can just all play by the same rules, by the nature of it, it gets less confusing, less litigious, it's clear. I don't know if the MLS has the ability to actually enact any kind of punitive damages the way that, like, supposedly code of ethics, you have to sit in front of a board and, defend yourself against an ethical complaint or whatever. MLS doesn't have that structure. They need to create that. I don't love MLS having that kind of power. I don't like that even the local MLS, by the way of delayed listing, has the ability to determine how many days I have to sell a listing off market. That doesn't feel fair. So I'm not sure MLS is built for that type of power, but I do like the idea, and I think everyone in my firm is pretty pretty much an agreement that if they could just have forms access and MLS access, they would no longer be members of the association. So I think NAR has some heavy lifting to do.
Yeah, and part of when I ran a state association early on in my tenure there, I asked, and it was a rhetorical question to the staff, but I said, "So who's our competition?" And they looked at me going, "What are you talking about? We don't have competition.
Right.
We're the State Realtors Association." It's like, well, how do you measure the value proposition, and who are you? I mean, what other company do you know that doesn't have competition? I mean, utility companies maybe, or monopolies. It's like, so we created kind of a fictitious competitor, and because what happens in the Realtor Association is, imagine you're running a business. At the beginning of the year, you're basically said, your top line revenue is guaranteed for the year. It's X, because everybody has to belong. It doesn't promote innovation. It doesn't promote trying to create unique value propositions. And so I think, again, some people might look at this as being anti-realtor, and it's not. It's really the way you create a valuable organization for its consumers or customers is to incentivize that organization to deliver more value. And the
100%.
current three-way agreement, which basically, segregates rules or areas for the local, the state, the national to play with each other, but guarantees the fees that everybody gets, undermines that structure of value creation and innovation. I mean, what happened at NAR this week about the 75 points in the strategic plan and all that? My comment back to NAR, which they don't give a rat's rear end about what I think, but
Me either.
I would say you missed.
None of us. They don't care what any of us think, really. They're in their own world. But go ahead.
They missed. There should have been a 76th point in that strategic plan, and that was at the end of the 3 years. If a realtor still didn't believe that they got value, that they got their money back, because they don't have a choice to leave. They're what I call captives.
Hostages.
And it's very difficult for anybody to feel like they're getting value if at first blush you say, and by the way, you have no choice about whether to purchase. And it's a fundamental, I think, flaw in the current structure that if the Realtor Association wanted to do something about, they could. I don't think they will unless there's some force that makes them.
Did you know that YouTube has a new feature where audience members can actually hype up the podcast they love? Can you give your girl a little hype? If you love what I'm doing here, like, comment, subscribe, share with your industry friends, DM me if you want to be a voice on the show. I love talking with people. Obviously, I'm curious about what's happening, checking myself to see if my opinions are in the right place or not. Always a space to learn at the Clean Close. Please give me some support. I love, love, love the feedback we've received so far, and I appreciate everyone for tuning in. Now back to the show. What do you think the unintended consequences are of open MLS access? Because it could be coming with AI.
Well, obviously, when you say open MLS access, to realtors and non-realtors is obviously the biggest one is making sure that that the rules are clear, that the rules are fair, and that when people violate the rules, they're held accountable for that. What those rules are, that's really for the industry to decide. And I think what we have now is we have a lack of clarity on what the rules are. And even in that context, as you mentioned, in many cases, a lack of enforcement of those rules. So,
Definitely.
The one thing I love about the real estate industry is it's made up of a bunch of very entrepreneurial people, and entrepreneurial people are great. I'm an entrepreneur, and that's why I think I love the industry. The challenge, though, is that some entrepreneurs take things too far, and they don't follow the rules. That's sort of the inherent element of an entrepreneur. They're not going to be bound by the rules. Well, in a cooperative industry like real estate that requires many times multiple firms to work with each other to effective sale for the benefit of the buyer seller, you need rules, you need people following the rules, and that's probably the biggest issue is today that's delivered top down from NAR. If NAR gets out of the game, then who's going to replace them? And I think it's a question can be answered, but there's a lot of work to do, a lot of leadership that's needed in order to do that.
What do you think then, given that? And I feel like NAR is such a behemoth. It moves so slowly that the industry is doing things like in my last segment, I was just talking about how Zillow integrated with ChatGPT without asking MLSs for any permission to do so whatsoever. There's a lot of jump first, ask questions later going on in our business right now. Refkin very publicly said to NAR, I'm going to tell my agents, don't abide by clear cooperation. Like there's a lot of renegade stuff going on right now. I think there could be a possibility that there's this battle being fought at a high level as if the game is still that game, but the game's changing right in front of our face. Like, again, it could be that AI is such a great aggregator of listing data and accuracy and whatever. It replaces any systems we thought MLS had a handle on. It could be that access becomes so easy to find now that we really don't find that we need so much, we don't really need much but actual forms and education. I still think there's a purpose too. I'm not anti-association, but I am not a fan of the current system continuing to exist as it does today. And I think that we are all experiencing that reality now. I've been on this bandwagon for a few years, realizing that ordinary voices can't be heard in this loud shouting, in the mass of bureaucracy that is our association right now. It just got too big. It needs to be pared down. I really do think that in order for it to be relevant anymore, I think like we've talked about, I think disassembling, and that was one of the things they said they're sticking to. They're not going to disassemble that three-way agreement. They're not disassembling that. Another thing that they said is that in their one of the things that she presented was that they're going to continue to do PR campaigns to strengthen the realtor brand. And I'm like, that's not it. It's not, this isn't a marketing and branding thing for association membership. What it really should be is what I wish they would have done when these lawsuits were coming out and the New York Times was doing wholly inaccurate reporting on what real estate agents charge and how they approach it, all of this stuff, is I wish they would have done a PR campaign for the value of agency, what an agent does, the value of the real estate agent as a professional entity, because we have suffered some black eyes and there are definitely forces from within and on the sides that are trying to recreate how real estate is sold, and maybe without us even being in it. So my question to you is, what do you see selling real estate? Well, what do you see selling real estate will look like in the next 3 to 5 years? That's not the right way to say that. Hold on, I gotta say that. What do you think selling real estate will look like in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah. So I think if we look at what's going on at a macro level, first of all, AI is going to play a part in the future. Second, there are sort of 3 things that are going on that the industry really needs to understand. One is the impact of Rocket's acquisition of Redfin and Mr. Cooper, and their what I call verticalization of the homeowner relationship around the mortgage.
Yep.
There's the economics and the money that is going to be delivered to support that model. Will it work? Don't know, but I give it a better chance than not that it's going to gain some traction. Second is the Wall Streetification, if you will, of real estate, and now the combination of Compass and Anywhere and the control of listing inventory and the impact on private exclusives is going to create, I think, a ripple effect where other companies, smaller companies, have to band together. I mean, you and your company might say, we're going to find 5 companies that look like us that all, have a certain market niche, and we're going to create our own private exclusive marketplace.
No, I'm telling you, the PLS, it used to be the PLS. They already created this. It needs to be a nationwide private listing network.
Right.
I think it'll save Compass a lot of money on lawsuits.
But that's going to have an impact. And then third is Zillow. I mean, Zillow clearly, if you look at the 2 largest economic growth drivers within the Zillow company today, it's mortgages and rentals. And you look at basically those 2 things again are sort of homeowner relationship going up the funnel and down the funnel in handling more of the transaction. I think all those things are going to trickle down to the rest of the industry, and we're finally going to see, I think, the industry transform from a transactional model that's based only on the buy and the sell and the economics of the buy and the sell to things in between the buy and the sell and homeowner relationship, things related to that, related to mortgage, because that's the only way the industry, I think, is going to be able to fight these other entities that have a tremendous amount of capital at their expense, and brokerage is going to change. It's going to change from being and so that's going to put a pressure on brokerage owners to take agents who today are very transactional, like what can I go and kill that's going to generate a commission in the next 30 days? We all know that. That's what makes
Hopefully
this
you're not
industry.
killing anything.
Not killing it, but I mean,
I know what you mean.
hunting those transactions.
Yes.
And I think we have to think broader than that,
Right.
going up the food chain to rentals, down the food chain to homeowner relationships, and how AI is going to play in all of that.
Well, it sounds like it's going to be a rocky road, but I'm very glad that you're spearheading so much of the conversation. Thank you so, so much for joining us on the Clean Clothes Russ. And by us, I mean me.
Great conversation, Courtney. Thanks for having me.
Finally, as we move into the Thanksgiving holiday, we are going to take 1 week off. And I'm wishing all of you a happy holiday. I hope that you guys have a great Thanksgiving and spend time with those that you love. I'm so glad we're not in COVID anymore and we're allowed to hang out with more than 6 people. I know. I feel like time is on like a different, whole different schedule since COVID. I can't keep track of years. It's really crazy. But I did want to introduce a tech tool that could really revolutionize your life. It's called the Do Not Disturb button on your phone. Okay, I know that we know it's there, but only recently have I employed this tool. I think it is underutilized. And I think for real estate agents who feel like they're constantly on demand, as I was saying before, even at night before you go to sleep, putting your phone on Do Not Disturb, it's underrated. It's totally underrated. I got the best sleep of my life last night when I put my phone on Do Not Disturb. And guess what? In the words of Sarah Kosaski, there are no real estate emergencies. It's like anything that happens after like 9 p.m. and before 8 a.m. can totally wait until the day starts. So just a reminder for Thanksgiving to keep your phone on DND in those important moments so you can hug the people that you love closely. We'll see you next time on The Clean Clothes. Bye.